World War II, 1939 to 1945, was one of the most significant and devastating conflicts in human history, involving nations across the globe in a struggle that reshaped the world order. The war began on September 1, 1939, when Nazi Germany, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, invaded Poland. This aggressive act led Britain and France to declare war on Germany, marking the official start of the war. The conflict quickly expanded, engulfing much of Europe and eventually drawing in countries from every continent. The causes of World War II are complex and rooted in the aftermath of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles, which ended the First World War, imposed harsh penalties on Germany, including significant territorial losses, military restrictions, and heavy reparations payments. These conditions led to widespread economic hardship and political instability in Germany, creating an environment ripe for the rise of extremist ideologies. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party capitalized on this discontent, promising to restore Germany's former glory and seeking to expand German territory through the concept of Lebensraum, or living space. The war in Europe was characterized by a series of aggressive moves by the Axis powers, particularly Germany, Italy, and Japan. Germany's blitzkrieg tactics, involving fast, coordinated attacks using air power and mechanized infantry, proved highly effective in the early stages of the war. Poland was quickly overrun, and by the spring of 1940, Germany had conquered Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. Britain, under the leadership of Prime Minister Winston Churchill, stood alone against the Nazi onslaught, enduring the Battle of Britain, a prolonged aerial campaign waged by the German Luftwaffe. The conflict expanded further with the involvement of the Soviet Union and the United States. Initially, the Soviet Union had signed a non-aggression pact with Germany, which allowed Hitler to focus on his Western campaigns without fear of a two-front war. However, in June 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion of the Soviet Union, marking the beginning of one of the largest and bloodiest campaigns in history. The brutal Eastern Front would see some of the most horrific fighting of the war, with millions of soldiers and civilians losing their lives. Meanwhile, the war in the Pacific began in earnest when Japan, seeking to establish dominance in Asia, launched a surprise attack on the United States naval base at Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. This attack led to the United States formally entering the war, joining the Allies, which included Britain, the Soviet Union, and China. The war in the Pacific was marked by fierce naval battles, island-hopping campaigns, and the use of aircraft carriers in strategic warfare. As the war progressed, the Allies began to turn the tide against the Axis powers. In North Africa, British and American forces successfully defeated German and Italian troops, paving the way for the invasion of Italy in 1943. The Italian campaign saw the eventual surrender of Italy and the toppling of Mussolini's fascist regime. On the Eastern Front, the Soviet Union, despite suffering immense losses, began to push back the German forces, culminating in the decisive Battle of Stalingrad, which marked a turning point in the war. In Western Europe, the Allies launched the D-Day invasion on June 6, 1944, in Normandy, France. This massive amphibious assault was the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany, as Allied forces began to liberate occupied territories and advance towards Germany. By April 1945, Allied forces from the West and Soviet forces from the East had converged on Berlin. Hitler, facing certain defeat, committed suicide on April 30, 1945, and Germany officially surrendered on May 8, 1945, marking the end of the war in Europe. In the Pacific, the war continued as the United States and its allies fought their way closer to Japan. The battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa were among the most intense of the Pacific campaign, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. Facing the prospect of a costly invasion of the Japanese mainland, the United States made the controversial decision to use atomic bombs against Japan. On August 6, 1945, an atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, followed by a second bomb on Nagasaki 3 days later. The devastating effects of these bombings led Japan to surrender on August 15, 1945, bringing World War II to an end. The aftermath of World War II was profound and far-reaching. The war had caused unprecedented destruction, with an estimated 70 to 85 million people losing their lives, including 6 million Jews who were systematically murdered in the Holocaust, one of the most horrific genocides in history. Entire cities were reduced to rubble, and millions of people were displaced from their homes. The war also led to significant political and social changes, including the collapse of European colonial empires and the emergence of the United States and the Soviet Union as superpowers, setting the stage for the Cold War. The United Nations was established in 1945 with the aim of preventing future global conflicts, and the Nuremberg trials were held to bring Nazi war criminals to justice. The economic devastation of the war prompted the Marshall Plan, through which the United States provided aid to help rebuild war-torn Europe. The war also spurred advancements in technology, medicine, and warfare, many of which would shape the modern world. World War II remains a defining moment in history, a stark reminder of the horrors of war and the resilience of the human spirit. The lessons learned from this conflict continue to influence international relations, military strategy, and the collective memory of nations across the globe. The war's legacy is evident in the enduring commitment to peace and cooperation among nations, as well as in the ongoing efforts to remember and honor those who suffered and sacrificed during this tumultuous period.